really about urban and rural form, because the transportation system is designed to serve a particular kind of form. And in terms of some of the stuff you're hearing here, to what extent is the issue of that urban form and even that urban and rural form a key element in it? And how do we address that going forward? Because we can't just be supplying on the basis of ad hoc demands kind of thing.
Well, I'd say that this is something that I was actually thinking about a lot this week because I was writing an article about it. And I think I really have come to the realization that it's almost as if we have already decided what we want the urban form to be, and we're trying to make everything else fit that urban form. So we have decided that we want to have a situation in which we have urban sprawl. Everyone wants to have a single-family house. Everyone wants to live away from the city centers because no one is talking about, how do we get people back into the city centers to live. Everyone is talking about the opposite. They're talking about how you get the jobs out to the people when no one is really talking about how you get the people to the jobs. So it's almost as if we have made up our mind that we want a certain urban form, a certain outcome, and everything else has to play catch up and sort of serve that need. I think it's the wrong approach. I think we take this whole concept of decentralization as a given, as if it's going to cure everything. I don't think it will. Because I think when you're talking about urban form and transportation, you also have to talk about economics. You have to talk about the fact that, if you have a sprawling urban form, that has economic implications. If you have weak urban centers, that means you lose a lot of the benefits of urban agglomeration. You lose benefits of economies of scale. But we don't talk about these things. So there's also the social aspect of it. We have this sort of urban form where everyone is living in this sort of individualized living arrangement, which means that now you have a breakdown of social interaction. You have an increase in loneliness, and it becomes even more apparent because a lot of the households now consist of just one person, according to the census. About 20% of the households right now, in 2011 anyway, consisted of one person. So if you have a situation where you have just one person living in a household, you have to start thinking about, this person has needs in terms of social interaction. And if we're designing the environment in a way where, everyone is sort of living in their own little bubble, there isn't that interaction. So that has a social impact. It can further lead to situations where, because people aren't interacting with each other, they don't trust each other, which can lead to crime. We don't talk about that. So I think there are a lot more issues that we are not talking about because it's almost as if we've made up our mind that we want to live in a certain way because we've bought into that idea that really has come from the American system of urban planning and sort of found its way into our planning system, into the media, into everything. And what's happening in a lot of other places is that is changing because people have realized that system does not work. It just can't work. So I think we need to figure out how we're going to address that problem, figure out what it is we really want.
So let me ask Ria a question in that context. How do we ensure that the transportation system that we develop, because the transportation system is developed through investment, either public or private. Besides the recent investments we are seeing in car parks, and those have been incentivized, the only private sector investment we see in transport is in the purchase of vehicles, either as public transport carriers or privately. But my question is really the investments in the transportation system, and given the economic situation that we have, we don't have unlimited funds for investment. We have very limited funds for investment. And therefore the question now must arise, and perhaps Ray could shine some light on it. How do we ensure that the investments that we do make are beneficial in terms of the same issues that Ryan raised, some of the concerns, and how do we ensure they encourage the right type of urban and rural development.
Okay. Yeah. Let me approach it this way, and in a sense, it will tie into what Cecil was raising. If you go around the islands, they all have advantages in how their transportation systems have developed. Jamaica, they have the halfway tree, is the most fantastic transit terminals. In Barbados, you have the Transport Authority. We don't have a transport authority. We have a transport board that has nothing to do with public transport. They have a transport authority. There are shortcomings, but I'm giving you the pluses. In Grenada, they have a parking system above the transit center. One little shortcoming about their operations is that you cannot schedule anything after 5, like you talk about Guyana. All your meetings have to be by 5 because nobody will come after that time. They don't have transport to go home. And Guyana, I was just there last week. Yes, the numbering system. Ultimately, we will get advantage in some of those things. Your question was, how do we get it? The first thing, we have to have a transport authority or a transport administration, as they call it in the United States. Scheduling is where the problem is. When you talk about where you're going to get it, the money is not going to be made from simply the passenger fare, because at certain hours you don't have the passengers. So it has to, we have the board or the authority has to introduce scheduling so that the operators will be selected for particular routes, and they will not be paying cash. We're moving away from cash for robbery and all that. All the vehicles will be monitored, and you're moving towards your smart cards like they have in Boston, or your non-cash operations, cashless, so that what you have is a recording of the use of, and that is what the operator will take periodically, quarterly or so, to the transport authority for his subsidy. That's how he gets it. He has worked the routes, so it is not a question of him going only when there are passengers. So there will be zoning of the operators, whether based on the demand, right? That's what we're talking about, and demand for where people are coming from, where they're going, and so on in the zones. And you have the right mix of vehicles. You won't have a set of large vehicles only. So it will be a combination of the publicly owned operators, the private, the different categories. And to deal a little bit with the form before I tell you the actual measure, when you have, one of the major benefits of public transportation is land preservation. You use less land. There's more open space. There's more space for other things, agriculture and whatever you want. Why? Because transit will take you around to those areas. We talk about the mixed use and so on. You have easier access with the transit, so the land is preserved. People who live in remote areas, there's no isolation because there's guaranteed public transport. And there's also, Ryan spoke about it, community interaction, the more you have it. So you have the tools, and there is a good opportunity for PPPs, public-private partnership, for the transport operators with some of those incentives, right? They can have syndicates, they can have different things to come in to the business of public transport. But it's governed by an authority.
You seem to be talking about, and I've seen some hands going up, so Lee will organize the mic for me. You seem to be talking about an adaptation of a system which is already in existence in terms of the way the PTSE has been working with the maxi taxis in the school transport system, notwithstanding the little hiccups that have been having over the last couple of years, which really I'm sure will be sorted out. But you're talking about a subsidy which is targeted at the user, and that's an interesting point. So we had a question from the floor.
Let me
right.
finish
Hello.
off here.
Cecil, you didn't finish yet?
Hello.
The point wasn't taken. It's really private enterprise operating the transport system. And that's where the efficiency will come in. And that's like Mr. Philip. He is in the private enterprise business of providing transport. But if you have that, I mean, I operate a company that if I don't take care of my equipment, or I have ownership, but if the people who are using it, like the ferry service. The people who running it, if they don't take ownership that I must get this boat from Trinidad to Tobago every day and at the right time and so on, if they don't have that kind of self-enterprise that they want to make this thing work, it's not going to work. Thank you.
The bad news is many of the operators, or let me say some of the operators who operate those maxis, they're losing money and they don't know because they're operating on cash flow only. So this will be a form, this arrangement, and there will be a need for the publicly owned operator like the PTSC because there are certain trips that will be of no advantage to the operators, and those the state will have to intervene. That's what we call the public.
But the state intervention need not, and I take Cecil's point, and I take Linus's point, the state intervention need not be through a state enterprise. The state's intervention is a financial intervention, and there's no law, no economic policy that is written in stone that says the state must only subsidize its users through a public entity. But let's deal with that question on the top, and then we come back to the discussion.
Hi, morning. What I'm trying to get is what does the most viable solution look like, right? There's a lot